I then learned that I was worthy of good
Mm.
treatment. I was worthy of rest. I was worthy of help. I was worthy of reciprocal relationships where what I was giving was being given back in at least a somewhat equal form. Because so many of my relationships up to that point were all me like achieving and trying again.
Welcome to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winning journalist, international speaker, mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This is a space where you belong, not because you earned it, not because of your title, your paycheck, or number of kids you have, but just because you are human and you are good. Here we explore progress over perfection, emotional and spiritual wellness, and how to relish the good parts of life that coexist with the not so good parts. This is Happiness in Progress. I'm so glad you're here today. Today, you get to hear from Brooke DeBoer. She is the author of Living the Free Life, a step-by-step guide to overcoming bullying, abuse, and living the life of your dreams. She is a coach and she is a dedicated advocate for personal transformation and self-discovery. In this conversation today, we talk about so much, and we start with the bullying. And this is something so many of us have gone through. We start with the bullying. We talk about the abusive relationship she was in, and then the good stuff, where the healing came in, how she was able to seek healing. I think you're going to walk away with some tangible tools you can use today. And I guess that means we're ready. Let's get to it. Hi, Brooke. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
The last time you came on was right before the pandemic. We had no idea what was coming toward us. I think it was like January or February of 2020. Tell me about what the difference in your life has been in these last 4 years.
Oh gosh. Well, during the pandemic is when I actually went through training to become a life coach. I don't think I fully realized when I came to see you on your podcast that I could be a source of inspiration for people or help people heal. I think I was still going through my own process of healing and learning how to love myself and what that looked like in all the forms. So I really feel like now I know what I'm here for. And I'm here to share my story. I'm here to serve others. I'm here to help others find their path to healing. And I think the time at home during COVID really gave me time to reflect and build up the courage to take that next step.
I love that. I've loved to see everything you've done and built over the last several years. When we first talked to you after the podcast, I think you said, I'm working on my website. I'm going to become a coach. And so it's just cool to see all of that happen. And you made that happen. So a big part of this book is bullying. And I think almost everyone probably can identify with that. Um, what have you been hearing as people have been reading the book about their experiences and how that experience you've gone through is resonating with them?
It's interesting. I'm getting different comments from everybody. Everybody has their own experience. One of my early readers of the book, whom I've known in the community for many years, we just didn't know each other well, really connected. And her story was similar to mine, but not the same. Like she didn't have the bullying, but she had the abusive relationship.
Mm.
And she actually had to go, her family members told her to go to a shelter.
Mm.
So her turnaround came when she was in the shelter. She had a few people give her words of wisdom and support, and that was the turnaround point for her. As far as bullying, I'm hearing all kinds of things from various moms from our kids' school. I had a few people come up to me at the book launch party telling me that they think maybe they have work to do, that maybe they cover their pain with humor. Um, so many people are seem to be expressing the need for this book and this conversation. So those are the ones that come to my mind at the moment, but there
What
are
is that?
many.
What does that feel like to you to hear that feedback?
It feels affirming that the step I needed to take to have the courage to tell my story was a good move. I think I knew it in my heart, and I think, I have faith, and I talked to God, and I felt like God talked to me and said, this is time. It's time for you to share your story. You have something to offer people. But it is affirming. It's helpful to have people provide that feedback and tell me their story. And one story comes to mind as you ask me this question. This isn't necessarily something that came after the book was published, but it's one of the reasons I continued when the resistance was strong when writing the book, because it was an emotional process. My daughter has a neighbor that was moving in when she was just after she got settled in her house. And we had put some things out on the street corner for people to take for free, things that she was not able to use in her home. And we happened to be outside when somebody stopped by and said, can we really take these? And somehow we got into a conversation, and she said, I'm just leaving an abusive relationship, and my father's here to help me, and I have 5 children. And I said, oh my gosh, well, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I had a somewhat similar experience to yours, as she shared her story. And she said, oh my gosh, please keep writing your book. I need your book. I need help. I need to know what my next steps are. I need to know that there's other people that have gone through this. And so it was that day that I was kind of ready to quit a few times while writing the story, because it was just very emotional and really scary to think about sharing. And when she told me that, I recommitted. So I have a book sitting downstairs that I need to go drop by her house. So I'm super excited for that moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that little nudge to keep working, because the work makes a difference. That's very cool. So one of the bullying stories I wanted to talk about, I think it happened in high school, and this just gut punched me.
Mm.
It's interesting because everyone's bullying experience is so different. And one of the things,
Mhm.
as you were going through high school, you were voted best body. And then
Mhm.
that really impacted how people treated you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was uncomfortable. It was in some ways, I guess, nice to receive some of attention, but it also created a situation where I think girls are already hard on each other in high school because we're just not sure of who we are. And we tend to be jealous and comparing and doing all the things, as we try to figure out who we are and what our values are and how we're going to show up in the world. And so to get attention for that was it was difficult. I don't even know how to describe it. It created more jealousy. I had a lot of girls that just didn't like me because I would receive attention, from boys or something. It seemed like that was one of the common threads. And for me, I would have preferred to just be noticed for my kindness, for my heart, for the things that I did to serve and care for others. I mean, that's how I wanted to be seen, but it seemed like it just kept coming in the other form. And then it would create more scrutiny by girls. And I had a lot of times where I was just left out of social groups or found out that people were saying nasty things behind my back. And it was really, really difficult to find my place in with female relationships in school.
Mm,
And that didn't help. It
yeah.
didn't help really anything, to be honest. I really disagree with this having been an award that was allowed by the adults in the school.
Oh my gosh, I know. My high school experience was not maybe on the other side of that. And instead of best body, people would say things like, at least you have a pretty face,
Hmm.
dissing my body. And I think that all comes around to this
Terrible.
obsession with bodies and what that female bodies specifically and how hard that is in high school. And that leaves a lasting impact. And
Mhm.
that's so much work to work through. And I loved this that you opened up about this really hard situation, because I think almost everybody um, can understand what it's like to have that obsession around bodies and
Mhm.
how that affects us internally.
Yeah, and I think for many years I used that to, I wouldn't say I wanted attention for my body, but I found that attention I got was something that how can I explain this? It's really a difficult one because
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't a good attention. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you're CrossFitting every day and you're working and you're being an athlete and you're going out and you're achieving in a sport and somebody says, wow, you have a really great body, then that's because you're putting work in and you're doing something to be fit. And it's like you have a sense of worth that's beyond just a physical appearance. But when people are making that the focal point, just your physical appearance, and they're not looking beyond that, it creates a situation where you're in the spotlight for something very shallow, very surface. And like you said, something that not everybody, it creates a atmosphere of comparison. And women's bodies come in all shapes and sizes. And it's not the thing that we need to notice the most. I mean, we already on social media now, we have so much of that, so much pressure to look a certain way and to be a certain size and to, show up looking perfect every day. We need it to be deeper and better. And so that was a hard one for me to share because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want it to any way come across like, oh, I mean, I got best body or something. I mean, the criticism and the bullying that I had in my life created a situation where I never wanted to shine because
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid I would be cut out.
Yeah.
So it was even hard for me to write about that in the book because I didn't want it to come across that way. And I'm glad it didn't come across that way for you because it was a fear and probably irrational based on years of bullying. So
Yes. Yes. I think bullying makes us put up all of these defense mechanisms to protect ourselves, and they're not all true. And I think that fear, I resonated with it so much. I actually, when I was in news, somebody told me that as I was a news anchor, I'd graduated college, I'd worked in 3 markets, put a ton of work into being a really good, honest, balanced journalist. Someone told me I was just the eye candy. And I was that. I've heard some people say, well, that's nice that they said that you were eye candy. Is it nice to totally disregard every single other part of our lives that we've worked through? I don't think so. So, what for everyone else that can identify with some kind of body issue, bullying being at the focal point, how did you heal from that? How do you move through that? That's hard.
well, it took me a long time. I didn't realize that the things I was reacting to, it's funny, just this week I was thinking about it, all the times where maybe somebody in a social situation was being mistreated by somebody, and I had a really strong reaction, and actually a reaction that put the focus back on me as being the reactive, emotional one or something. I became a fierce defender for anybody who was being bullied, but I didn't really understand that I needed to do that for myself. I needed to do that work for myself for many years. And it wasn't until I had a health crisis well into my marriage and having 3 children where I had a thyroid issue and all of a sudden everything crashed all at once. And the doctor was like, well, this is stress induced. It isn't Hashimoto's. It's, your numbers aren't showing that you have inflammation. It was just a sudden drop to where I couldn't even do anything. And he's like, you need to ask for help. Your family needs to step up. You're not to do the dishes. You're not to do anything
Mm,
for a little while. You have to just stop and focus on your healing. And he gave me sort of a prescription for every 2 weeks having a relaxing massage, like sitting and being quiet and, asking for help and all these things that I was so terrible at because I had developed this tough persona to just survive through and not show anybody that I was weak or a victim, because I had had so much of the other that I had internalized that I had to go out and prove my worth rather than just loving myself and knowing my worth. So I think that distinction happened after the illness came, and I was forced to ask for help. I was forced to take care of myself. And in that process, I then learned that I was worthy of good treatment. I was worthy of rest. I was worthy of help. I was worthy of reciprocal relationships where what I was giving was being given back in at least a somewhat equal form. Because so many of my relationships up to that point were all me, like achieving and trying again, even if I wasn't being treated well or whatever.
Everyone can go listen to the first episode that we did because you talk a lot about that health crisis and that wake up call.
Mhm.
One of the things you wrote in the book is I was just going through life doing things for unconscious reasons, mostly to receive love. And
Mhm.
you also talk about this abusive relationship you were in. And
Mhm.
I have noticed with friends who and loved ones who are coming out of these abusive relationships, what happens in those relationships is almost like a disconnect from yourself, like a
Mhm.
disconnect in believing in that worth that you were talking about. So,
Mhm.
how does someone get there? It's from things like bullying, abusive relationships, where we actually do get disconnected from ourselves. And I think you talk about this as the disconnection with the inner voice. When
Mhm.
did you first notice you had become disconnected with your inner voice?
Oh gosh. The first time I noticed it, literally, I'm 50 years old. I don't think I noticed it until, in some ways, until I actually wrote the book, did I not
Mm.
actually fully realize it. But I think when I started going to therapy and I started getting that like affirming care that my emotions and my feelings were valid. And I will say that I think when I was in my doctor's appointment and I had a very emotional response to him saying, that this is a stress induced situation. And I shared with him that my mom had had a trauma when I was a young girl. And which is where I think some of my disconnect started, because I think when you're being raised in a house with somebody who probably has some form of PTSD and is trying to survive and get through their own trauma, and you're a young person, you just subconsciously adapt to the situation. For me, I think I felt like in ways I needed to care for my mom because I could sense, her trauma and
Mm.
her struggle. But I think when I was in the doctor's office and he told me, that this is stress induced, it sort of was like, oh, okay, like these feelings that I'm carrying are telling me something. And I just didn't know what that was or how to listen to it. And then I started to go to therapy and counseling, and they started to just be there to sit with me through the emotions and affirm with me, this isn't bad that you're having these feelings or these emotions. This is just something that you need to process and get out, and then we need to
Mm.
figure out the path forward from here. And that's when I really started to listen, because I was like, these feelings are connected to experiences that I've had that need time to process and explore so that I can release them. I think when you're carrying them all inside and you don't really know what they are, and then you're just doing auto responses to life, it's really hard to listen to your own voice because you're really more externally motivated. Like what you said, like I was out seeking love from and validation from my work, from my hard work, from the relationships I was in, rather than starting with me and my voice, listening to my voice and how I felt, and giving myself the time and care to do that.
And I think a lot of people are this way, which is why so many people are resonating with the book is we're always working to earn that worth. Um, When we talk
Mhm.
about trusting yourself and you look back at the full picture of the bullying, the abusive relationship, how do you think that impacted your ability to trust yourself?
I just think when people are constantly telling you negative things about yourself, or like I had a high school boyfriend who was very focused on body and eating cucumbers to stay thin and whatever else. It was just silly now looking back on it. I'm like, why would I ever listen to that? But, I was young and I wanted to stay in the relationship and I wanted him to like me, and I think when you don't really know what's at work, you just internalize those things and they maybe take a notch out of your self-confidence or your ability to believe in yourself. When you're made fun of, or when you're um, told that you don't fit in whatever group it is, or you're just completely ignored, like it makes you start questioning yourself. And am I worthy of being here? Do I have something to offer? Maybe I am really awkward, or which, by
Mhm.
the way, being awkward isn't uncool in my opinion. But I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
whatever it is, it tends to create like tapes that play in your head. And then each one kind of takes a notch away from your ability to be courageous and step out and be seen. And then you kind of find ways to like hide or work hard for approval to achieve or whatever. We all have different responses. So I think it really works on your self-worth.
Hmm. And when I think about that, that's such a trapped place to be. And so I
Mhm.
love what you call your coaching practice, free life, and also the book is living the free life. So tell me what that feels like in comparison, living the free life.
Yeah, well, I've identified with the word free. It like came to me, and I feel like it was God speaking to me at one point. Like even my personal email is free Brooke. But the word free just kept coming to me. And I do believe it was God speaking to me saying, you can be free of this. You can heal from this. You can be the person I created you to be versus the person that everybody was trying to define me as. And I, it just stayed with me and I kept doing the work, and I messed up a lot too in the process. Like I would have reactive responses to people who would be sharp with me, or I would not respond well if I was being controlled, even if the person wasn't a bully, but maybe they were being controlling. And then it started to like come back on me where people would think I was reactive or a problem, an emotional person that was maybe unpredictable. And at one point, I had to decide in an adult relationship, I had to decide, how do I want to show up and what kind of person do I want to be? And I wanted to be a force for love and light. So I had to learn how to fix my reactions to other people and instead learn how to respond
Hmm.
and continue to work on my heart because I was being triggered a lot by people. So that was also a motivation for me to kind of really refocus on what freedom means to me. And what freedom means is you're not owned by other people's behavior. You're able to be free to, okay, that hurt, but now how am I going to respond to that person? How am I going to show up? And so a lot of the second part of the book and a lot of the work I do in coaching is first we process those emotions so we can be aware of them and how they're showing up in our life. But then we start working on, how do you want to show up in the world, and what would you like to achieve, and what goals do you have for yourself? And I think when you can put those two things together, you can create the freedom in your life to live and choose how you're showing up and what you're doing, and it creates a path for your dream life.
I love that you mentioned the react versus responding because that's such a huge thing for me personally. And we talk about it a lot in our family. And just that, I can't remember the quote right now. I'm so bummed I can't remember it, but it's something about the time between the stimulus and what you do next. is
Mhm.
so valuable, because during that time where you just take the breath or you walk away or you think for a minute about how you're going to respond instead of knee-jerk reaction can make all of the difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm still working on that. I think it's going to be a lifetime work for me because as much healing and as much work as you do, I'm not saying you can't be at complete peace. I hope that and wish that for everybody. But we're still going to have moments where we're tired or stressed out, and then somebody does something and it's going to trigger us. But if you can, like you said, come up with a few different, like a few things, or even one thing you tell yourself, like count to 10 before you say anything, maybe that can help so that you can have the response that or you can achieve the outcome you're hoping for, which most of us, when we're having a difficult situation with somebody, are not hoping for a really terrible, disconnected outcome. We're hoping to have an outcome that feels like we can all be at peace and we can at least agree to disagree.
Mhm.
So, still working on it.
And that's the grace for everybody, as we're all going to work on this together throughout our entire lives. One of the things that you talked about kind of in as you begin to heal, I think can be an action step for people listening, is figuring out your core values.
Mhm.
Talk us through how you did that, or maybe what some of the first steps are on let's take a step back and figure out our own values.
Yeah, I spent a lot of reflection time with my journal. I find a lot of inspiration with Brene Brown's work. Two key principles that I have really taken from her and implemented in my life are making a list of your values, understanding what those values are, and even picking a couple to focus on so that you can really get comfortable with understanding what are those values and how would you like them to be part of your experience in your life. And so I provide a list, in the book, but it's not limited to that list. And one of her books also has something similar. So I highly recommend, looking into that as well. And I think just understanding your values, understanding what is really important to you, and knowing that it's okay to have really big dreams and things you want to accomplish. And in your relationships too, I encourage all of my girls, and I did this for myself. And a friend told me that I think her grandma had her do this, or her daughter. I can't remember if it was her or her daughter, but write a list of the qualities that you're looking for in a relationship and
Mm.
getting really clear about that. And I had one counselor who said, you deserve to be in a reciprocal relationship. So one of my values was to have um, quality connection and friendship, but it needed to be defined very clearly that that was going to be a reciprocal relationship. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I think just taking the time to know what's important to you and what is at the top of your list, and then
Mhm.
making sure that the actions you're taking in your life are reflecting those values.
I think it's very easy to be a yes person and say yes to everything and do things, but if you don't have that list of values, um, you're gonna find yourself maybe off the path of what you want to be. You're gonna be the PTO president, and you're gonna be like, "Wait, this wasn't my priority. This this doesn't
Yeah.
support my values, but I said yes, so here I am." Um, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Go
share
ahead.
some of the core values you listed, because it's everything from being bold to faith to community to kindness. I love that.
Really understanding what it is that's important to you and taking the time to do that. We don't do that enough. We spend all of our life, like you said, especially those of us that are people pleasers. Some people aren't, but a lot of the women that I know are. And I think it's also a cultural thing. Like we're encouraged to be nice, and it's great to be nice, but I like the distinction of being kind, but you don't always have to be nice. You know what I mean? Like you
Mhm.
don't be mean or anything, but but I think sometimes truth isn't included in that definition, and it's okay to tell the truth and say, this doesn't work for me. Um, but you can still be kind about it. So
Yeah.
I think,
You wrote about that
working.
in the boundaries chapter 2. And what did you say? Brene Brown
Mhm.
says, defining boundaries is what is okay and what is not okay either. Love that.
Yeah, that was such a game changer for me. That creating boundaries is that simple. What is
Hmm.
okay for me and what's not okay. But the challenge is you have to know. You have to know what's okay with you. And if you spent your whole life pleasing everybody else and being told what to do and how to act, how to show up, or copying those people that are around you, and you haven't taken the time to determine what is important to you and what is, because even you could have the best parents in the world, but you are not your mom. You're not your dad. You still need to find your own path and find what's okay or not okay with you. And hopefully you have been raised in a supportive family that supports that supports you
Hmm.
shining the way that you're supposed to shine and being the person you're supposed to be, not a copy or a replica of somebody else. And I think when we do that, when we do all this people pleasing, we often tend to be resentful and we tend to have stress or reactions because we're not living in our authentic truth of who we are.
Hmm.
So,
It's funny because I am not a people pleaser, but I can still get kind of stuck in a lot of these uh I can kind of get stuck still, I guess I'll say, because I'm a doer and I just like to be involved. I just like to do
mhm.
everything. And I'll say no if I say yes mostly for myself because I'm like, ooh, that
Yes.
sounds fun. I'll do it. Um, but I loved this part of your book that I want to read. This comes from the clarity chapter. It says, quote, I am very good at being busy and working hard on projects that would seem to have a clear goal and purpose. I've learned along the way, however, that sometimes my hard work and busyness aren't exactly from a place of clarity. It's more anxious, busy work with a sprinkle of my values mixed in. End quote.
Mhm. Mhm.
I honestly, I might like write that somewhere because a sprinkle of our values mixed in, the plan might, be clear, and you might say, okay, yes, I'm going to do this. This sounds like great work, and I think you were talking about working on some of the work for your husband's racing and the
Mhm.
docu series, but the question is, where are my values in there?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I have an exact example of that became very clear when I was creating the Fast Life series, which is a docu-series I did to follow his story. And while my values are I'm passionate about storytelling and what inspiration stories can provide for people. So I think that was the underlying motive. A lot of what I was doing and how I was doing it was out of anxiety for his safety, anxiety to be included and maybe not left out. That came from previous toxic relationships where I didn't have full commitment from the person I was with. I was giving more than they were giving, so I figured that out at one point, and now my husband and I have found a way better balance for how I can support him in the storytelling around the racing that he's doing. So I'm getting to do my own things and I'm still there to support. And now we hire somebody else to come in and do some of the work so that it takes some of the weight off my shoulders. So I'm not completely stressed out or overrun. And we get to work as a team with other people, which is amazing. So it's amazing the blessings that you don't know can come from just reaching out and asking for help and not trying to do everything yourself and recognizing your limits, and how important it is to care for yourself.
Oh my gosh, Brooke, that is so good. And I'm so glad you shared that because I think a lot of the yes that I want to make sure to say this because I did just say I say yes for myself.
Mhm.
I think a lot of it's out of anxiety and
Yeah,
control. If I can have my hands in everything, then everything will be fine. Oh my
exactly.
gosh, that's so
Oh,
powerful.
I feel that 100%. And I still fight it a little bit. I'm still really working on it. Like I notice moments where I just feel like last night in my daughter's soccer game, they're doing really well this year. She plays for Cascade, but I've noticed myself getting more and more intense because they've started to actually do well in their games and I'm hollering out stuff. And even I got a little negative and I came home and I said to my husband, like, what am I doing? Like, why do I do that? Can you help me? And he just said, like, I just know that nothing I'm going to yell is going to change the outcome of the game. Probably our daughter would prefer that we're not yelling anything out. And I was like, okay, duh, I know this, but still the control tendency of wanting all the outcomes to be okay for everybody. I think that that comes into play a lot in my life. So I am working on it, but it's all lifelong work, you know?
Yes, yes, and I think it starts with the awareness. I my dad was hospitalized, and I was driving, and I dropped everything, got my kids out of school. We drove down to Southern California, and as I was driving, I realized that the reason I was wanting to go was so that I could be in there in case, he coded or anything happened, and I could, make sure
Of
he was
course.
okay. But then I realized I actually don't know what to do in the case of a person coding.
Mhm.
I'm not the expert there, but I just wanted to have control over the situation. And that was a big eye-opening moment for me that I can go to support my dad. I'm not going there I can't control the situation. I have no
Right.
control. It was a pretty scary bout with sepsis, and he's okay now.
I'm
But
sure.
but
And
um
I
he's okay.
understand why you would do that.
Yeah, but
So
he's okay, not because like I controlled the situation. I had to release
because
that. And so I'm working
yeah,
on the releasing.
yeah, I think understanding like it's a big sign of growth when you start to catch yourself or you are clear about what you can control and what you can't control. And I think
Yeah.
that's always the question, like, okay, is whatever I'm doing right now something I can control? Is it going to change the outcome of the situation? Or is it a time where, I need to quietly pray, or I just need to take a breath, or hold somebody's hand while they're having a hard time and let them process their own emotions? Um, all of that. I totally get it. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry that happened because I'm sure that was very stressful for
Yeah.
you.
Everything's learning. Okay. I didn't get to talk about Unleash Your Power Within. I think we went through the same thing together in 2020.
Yeah.
We didn't get to talk about let's see what you called her. Sunshine Fierce,
Oh,
but
yes.
everybody can read the book and learn about finding your peak state. So I guess I will go right to the last question, which is
Hmm.
the same one you've already answered before. It is, what is your number one tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in between?
Oh, my number one tip, to take time to love yourself, to get quiet, to know yourself, and trust that inner voice. Trust what your heart is telling you. I made a social media post this morning. Take the 18-inch journey from your head to your heart and trust what's there, and it will lead you to where you need to go.
I love that. The 18-inch journey. Thank you so much, Brooke, for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. It was so much fun to talk to you. You can find all of the information to get Brooke's book in show notes. You can also find information on how to connect, as well as her first conversation that she had here on the podcast back in 2020. I'll link that as well. Thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.